Hi, in this video we're going to sketch a negative quadratic graph. What do I mean by a negative quadratic graph? Well, in this expression here, the minus 2x squared plus x plus 6, can you see that the number in front of the x squared term, we call that the coefficient of x squared, we can see that is negative, and that makes this a negative quadratic if the number in front of the x squared is negative. Now, remember what the shape of a quadratic graph is. We saw that when we were plotting quadratic graphs. If the number in front of the x squared was positive, so we had a positive number and then x squared like that, then it has this kind of smiley face kind of shape. And if we had a negative quadratic, so minus ax squared, it could be minus x squared, like minus 1x squared, minus 2x squared, then we get this frowny face or hill type shape like this. Now we can see that it's a negative number in front of the x squared, so we're going to get this second shape here. So that's the shape we're expecting. Now, in general, our starting point when we sketch a quadratic graph is to work out where the graph intercepts the y-axis and where it intercepts the x-axis. So where does a graph cut the y-axis? Where does it cut the x-axis? Now, notice on the y-axis, any point on the y-axis, the x value, the x-coordinate, is always equal to 0. Now, if you look at this, if x was 0, we substitute x as 0 in, would have minus 2 times 0 squared, that's just 0, plus 0, plus 6, that will give us 6. So basically, this constant term, usually at the end, that will give you the y-intercept. So when x is 0, y is 6, and we're going to have that here. Now, to find where it cuts the x-axis, that's a bit harder, because you can see any point on the x-axis, the y-coordinate is 0, the y value is 0. So what we need to do is make this y value 0 here, substitute y 0, and then solve that equation. So let's do that. We're going to make y 0, so we can have 0 equals, and then it's minus 2x squared plus x plus 6. Now, in general, to solve a quadratic equation where you have a positive number in front of the x squared is much easier when it's negative. So what I'm going to do is a little trick. I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by negative 1. And if you do that, well, 0 times negative 1 is just still 0. 0 times anything is 0. And then when you times the right-hand side by negative 1, it just changes the sign of every term. So the minus 2x squared becomes positive 2x squared. The plus x becomes minus x, and the plus 6 becomes minus 6. Now, how do we solve a quadratic equation like this? Well, the way we do it is we find two numbers that add to give the middle number. Now, there is no middle number. If I just put a 1 here, minus 1x is the same as minus x. We need two numbers that add to give this middle number of minus 1, so the coefficient of the x term, and they multiply to give the first times the last term. So 2 times minus 6 is minus 12. Now, what numbers add to minus 1 and times to give minus 12? Let's just think of numbers that times to give just positive 12 for the moment to make it easier. Well, 3 and 4 times to give 12, right? So 3 and 4 multiplied to give 12. But we need to get negative 12. So one of those two numbers of the 3 and the 4 has to be negative. Which way around is it going to be? Well, we need these two numbers to also add up to give minus 1. But if we had 3 plus 3 and minus 4, those two numbers do add up to give minus 1, don't they? 3 plus negative 4 is minus 1, and they do times give minus 12. So we found the two numbers, that's great. And then what we do is we split the middle term using those two numbers. So we're going to split the minus 1x into plus 3x and minus 4x. Because if you were to simplify that, 3x minus 4x would be the same as minus 1x, right? And then let's just copy the other terms. We have 2x squared here and the minus 6, and that's equal to 0. And then what we do is we factorize the first half and the second half. So factorizing the first half, the 2x squared plus 3x, what can we take out? Well, they have a common factor of x. And then you think, what goes in the brackets? X times by what gives you the 2x squared above? Well, it's 2x. And x times what gives you the plus 3x? Well, it's plus 3. And then what we do is we leave a little gap and then repeat that bracket. And then we think, what goes in that space? Well, what multiplied by the 2x would give you the minus 4x above. Well, it's minus 2, isn't it? And let's just check. Minus 2 times 3, that gives you minus 6, which is right. We can see the minus 6 above. So that does work. And then remember to get those final brackets, whatever you have inside the bracket, that makes one of the brackets, like this. And then whatever's outside of your bracket, so the x and the minus 2, that forms the other bracket. And now we've got a fully factorised expression. At this point, once you've got it factorised, you've got a product of two brackets. So these two brackets multiplied together give you 0. If two numbers multiply to give 0, then at least one of them has to be 0, right? So if the 2x plus 3 is 0, so let's write that, 2x plus 3 is 0. Let's solve that. Or we can subtract 3 from both sides. And then we can divide both sides by 2 to give minus 3 over 2. And remember, the quick way to do this is that whatever this constant term is, the thing without the x, you negate that. So you change the sign. So the plus 3 becomes minus 3. And then you divide it by the number in front of the x. So it's minus 3 over 2, which is what you've got here. And we do the same over here. If we just negate this, the minus 2 becomes plus 2 over the 1 in front of the x, because that's 1x. Minus 2 over 1 is just, the minus 2 becomes plus 2, over 1 is plus 2. So we get 2. Because you can clearly see that 2 minus 2 would give you 0, right? So we've now got the values of x that make y 0. It's when x is either negative 3 over 2 or x is 2, that makes y 0. So on this graph, when x is 2, y is 0, and when x is minus 3 over 2, which is the same as minus 1.5, that makes y 0. And we said earlier, because it's minus 2x squared, minus 2 is a negative number, we saw that we're going to get this shape here, the hill shape, if you like, because we had a minus 2x squared here. Okay, right, so our graph is going to go through these 3 points. And note also, by the way, that because a quadratic graph is symmetrical, the line of symmetry is actually going to be halfway between this minus 1.5 and the 2 here. So halfway between those is going to be about here, isn't it? I think it's actually going to be 0.25. So the maximum point of this graph is going to be up here. So when we draw this, it's got to go through all 3 points. It's going to go slightly above and then start to come down. And you should, sorry, I've drawn that a bit bad. Let's do that again. It should go through all 3 points. Okay, that's a bit better. Not perfect. But if you're doing this on the platform, you should have 3 control points that you can drag around on your computer, and then it will draw a graph that goes through those 2 points for you.